you're making decisions on a lot of very important things right now, but I do think it's worth giving listeners context of like what your term has been like. And if you're willing, take us through that second impeachment vote and how you thought about it. And just so we don't bury the lead here, Anthony voted in favor of impeachment of the president at the second vote.
So just quick rewind. So the 2020 election happens, right? And from the time it ended until, say, January 6th, I had a deeply uneasy feeling and felt like things were going to get pretty crazy. Because I was seeing the rhetoric that was coming out of the White House. I was seeing how it was being reported, and I was hearing from my constituents how they were feeling. And to me, it was pretty clear. And I personally think anybody who's in this business who knows how elections work should have known it was clear. And so, to me, I was thinking, man, hopefully people aren't buying this because this is crazy. I remember talking to somebody very close to me, and they said, gosh, this thing was stolen. I said, what country do you think you live in? This thing wasn't stolen. I said, tell me where you think it was. And, they would give me this, some of these explanations that you'd be hearing on like these QAnon boards and on Twitter and whatnot. And you could usually dispel them, but, these were people close to me, but like your average person, they didn't have full access to me and I could barely get our message out. So I remember grabbing my chief of staff. I said, like, just find me a camera, like just get me in front of a camera. I need to start talking to people and telling them because otherwise we're going to have a problem. Like there's going to something terrible is going to happen if people think this thing was stolen. I mean, this is the United States. If half the country believes the election was stolen, we're going to have a real violent outcome here. I was hoping to be wrong, but that's what I thought was coming. And lo and behold, you sort of fast forward as we get closer and closer to January 6th, the pressure builds. And on the morning of January 6th, they told us, I said, hey, you got to come in early. Just get here early. There's going to be a big protest and it'll be easier for you if you're here early. So, okay. So early to me, I wake up at 4. So early to me is like, I'll go, 4:30, 5 o'clock and I'll get in. And this was during the pandemic when nobody was ever on the streets. Normally from where I live to get to the Capitol, it takes like 15 minutes. This time it took 45 minutes because there were buses and buses and buses from all over the country. And the mall was already pretty well filled and packed with people and energy and activity. And signs, you can read the signs as you're going in. Signs I've never seen before that didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, okay, this is actually going to be a lot worse than I even thought. And so I tried to send my staff home, but they stayed. They insisted. And we had already pre-released what I was going to do, which was to certify the election. And so, fast forward a little bit, and we're in the House chamber, and I'm up in the balcony because I wanted to see a couple things. First, I wanted to make sure Pence did the right thing. I don't know what my plan was going to be if he didn't, but I just wanted to make sure. And then the second thing, I just wanted to see if they would actually go through with these objections. Because I thought it was crazy. I thought it was the most anti-democratic thing I've ever seen in my life. I still feel that way. And so, I'm sitting there, Pence does the right thing. Okay, good. And then Ted Cruz stands up and objects. And I was just disgusted. I was just completely disgusted. And so I said, I got to get out of here. So I started walking out of the chamber and I was going to go back to my office. And then I could see the people start to breach. I looked out one of the windows.
Oh my God.
And you see the people start to go. And then I flipped on my Twitter and, you could see, oh my, they've already gotten through the Senate. And so, at that point I thought, okay, it's best thing for me to do is just get into my office. So I get into the elevator, go through the tunnels, boom. And by the time I get back, the folks were already in the house. The rioters were already in the house and they were trying to evacuate people. And basically the session had been canceled. And so now you're sitting there going, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not good. I know that much. And the basic instructions we got were, if you're not with the other members, they had hidden the other members in a sort of a bunker, if you will. If you're not with them, shut off all the lights and be dead silent because we don't want you making any noise. It's like, okay. So but I'm like sitting in my office and thinking, okay, I should probably change out of these clothes so I don't look like a member of Congress in case they bust through the door.
Yeah.
So I threw on jeans and running shoes and I'm thinking to myself, well, I can still run a little bit. So if they get in here, I guess I'll just jump over them and sprint. And that's, maybe that's my plan. And so we did all that. And then, periodically, like you would hear screams and yells and stuff. And I called down at one point and I said, hey, there's somebody making a lot of noise in our hallway. Can you send somebody up? I don't know. And the dispatch was like, sir, we are completely overwhelmed. Just like do the best you can. I'm like, okay. That doesn't sound so good.
Yeah,
right. So then I started trying to get a hold of folks at the White House and just anybody I knew who might be there saying, hey, he's got to call this off. Like this has gone way too far. And he wouldn't do it. And it took him hours. I think almost 3 hours, maybe a little more than that. But when you're in a situation like that, 3 hours feels like 15 hours. I mean, you're just hoping to God that somebody does something responsible. And it just wasn't happening. And so, my view remains that it's an unforgivable assault on the country. And it was led by the former president. It was inspired by him. And ultimately, my view, which I think is coming out in this January 6th commission, is that he kind of liked it. He kind of liked what was going on. And I spoke to a number of people who were around him that day and came to that conclusion. And so at that point, you have to ask yourself, are you willing to make that vote, that impeachment vote?
And to be clear, there was previously an impeachment vote that you had not been in favor of, but this specific event is sort of what changed your mind to say, yes, I'm one of, I believe it was 6 Republicans to vote to impeach. I
think we were 10. I mean, it may have been 6 senators, but in the House, there were 10 of us. The first one, not to go back to it, but I certainly didn't condone the behavior, but it just didn't hit my bar for impeachable.
That was the Russia stuff, right?
That was it was actually Ukraine, right? He tried to theoretically bribe Zelensky. Back to this current vote. As that was unfolding, admittedly, on January 6th, I thought to myself, I think they're going to impeach him again. Democrats control the House, so they control what goes to the floor. I swear I think they're going to do it again. So I better start thinking about this. And I kind of went back and forth, not because I didn't think it was wrong or impeachable. I certainly did. The thing I was kicking around in my head was what he did was clearly impeachable. But, he has 6 days left by the time, the vote comes, or 3 days. It's like, is that really the right thing to do? Should we censure him? Should we do something else? And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that not only was it the right thing to do, but we actually had to do it for a whole host of reasons. But one of the main ones is because I think it's important that we send a message to every future president forever that if you think for 1 second you can concoct this ridiculous plan and sick your supporters on Congress and the Capitol, resulting in a bunch of deaths and the total embarrassment of our country and a grave wound on the country, on the democracy itself, then you are going to get impeached. And everybody needs to know that. And so that was ultimately the decision I came to. But admittedly, it was the hardest decision I've ever had to make professionally, for sure.
Well, this is one of those where potentially your own interests are misaligned from what you believed was the right thing to do. I mean, did you know that in casting this vote, that would be the end of your ability to serve a subsequent term?
No, honestly, I planned to fight it. So I knew it was going to be hard. But ultimately, look, at the end of the day, I've made 2 oaths in my entire life. Okay. I've made 1 oath to my wife and I've made an oath to the Constitution. Those are the only 2 oaths, to my knowledge, that I've ever taken. And I don't plan to break either one. It really came down to that for me. It's like, I feel like I owe this to the country. I feel like I have to do this. And it's going to be brutal and it's going to be terrible for me. And it was. But you got to do it. And then you got to fight for your political life. And ultimately, that was the plan. And that's what I intended to do. But admittedly, after many months of sort of going through that process and really trying to figure out, independent of the politics, trying to figure out what kind of life do my wife and I want? Like, what do we want for our kids? What do we want for us? Where do we want to be? What kind of jobs do we want? It was pretty obvious as our kids are getting older that politics probably isn't the best place. And so made a very difficult decision again, which was to drop out of the campaign and I'll finish my term out here in January and we'll see what happens.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth? Who got the truth now?